working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. Waymaker. You are Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Jesus, that is who you are. Jesus, even when I don't see it, and even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. And even when I don't feel it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Waymaker.
Hey, good to see you. Back in Bubbles again. Got another session for you, and I've got some thoughts, and you can use them for a discussion or not, or you can think about it later, or you can use it in your devotional. But one of the things I was remembering just recently is a message I spoke. I don't even know how long ago it was. I think it was probably about 14 or 15 years ago, and we were gathering at that stage on our Sunday mornings in Paraparaumu College auditorium, and I spoke a message called Nigel No Mates, how to end up with no mates at all. That was my topic and my subtitle, and then I went through 10 points on how to be a person who didn't have any mates and who was lonely and no one wanted to be around. And I remember that one stuck in my head. I remember many people spoke to me over years later about how they remembered that message about Nigel No Mates. And I was just, as I was remembering back to that, I really felt prompted, and through some conversations again that I have been having, to reflect on the importance of relationships and the importance of close relationships. And part of that is in this idea of friendship, in this idea of connection, in this idea of being part of community that actually brings transformation around in our lives, that we need relationships with other people for that to happen. And so one of the things that I think is really important in this stage of human history and in the journey that God's got us on is the idea of what I would call a decreasing span of relationships. So I'm just going to explain what I mean by that. If you look at Jesus's world, he had a crowd that he hung around with and that followed him around. That could have been anywhere from, 400 or 500 to multiple thousands of people. We know that he obviously fed the 5,000 in one story, and that was just the men without the women and children. So you've got a crowd there of potentially, some estimates are saying there could have been 12 to 15,000 people in that crowd. Now that's a pretty large span of relationship. I can't say that Jesus would have known everyone in the crowd by name. He might have known some of them, but definitely not all of them. And then you look also at his world, and he had in the upper room, so after he had passed away or had died, and then we see in the beginning of Acts in the upper room there's 120. So there was obviously another span of relationships that Jesus had where there was 120 people who were committed to being together in spite of the fear and in spite of the uncertainty and the risk from the Romans in regards to their pursuit. And then you see earlier in Jesus' journey where he sends 70 out. So there was another group of 70 that were, he called part of his team really, and he sent them out on mission into the highways and byways and cities and villages, and not to take anyone with them, but to go and trust God and to go out in twos. So there was 70, and then you know about the 12 that he called that became the apostles. So you're seeing this decreasing span of relationship, and then even goes lower than that. And Jesus had these three, in terms of Peter, James, and John, who were very close to him. He invited them to experience things and to be with him in things that the other 9 disciples didn't get to experience. And so I see in Jesus's world there were these spans of relationship, and as those spans, and what I mean by that is the numbers of people he was engaging with, as they decreased, the intimacy increased. To the point where with the 3, you see Jesus inviting that 3 to be with him in the Garden of Gethsemane in the hardest moment of his life. He's invited 3 to be present with him in that moment, the level of intimacy that he was inviting them to be in with him. Prior to that, those same 3 were invited to what became known as the Mount of Transfiguration, where Jesus took them up onto a mountain, and there Elijah and Moses appear, and those 3 got to experience that moment where Jesus was transfigured and physically changed by his encounter with Moses and Elijah, and the voice of God speaking about him saying, "This is my son with whom I'm well pleased." So there was this idea of spans of relationship. And I think one of the things that I think is a challenge for us in this day and age with the busyness the pace and the busyness we live our lives at, is that we do not have the smaller spans of relationship. Most of us, I think, struggle to build the intimacy of the three that Jesus had, who he confidently invited them into some of the most profound moments of his human experience with him. And I ask the question of you, do you have three like that? Who no matter what's happening, you can pick up the phone, you can flick them a text, and you know they've got your back, you know they're unconditionally going to accept you and be with you in the moment. I think it's easier for us to have groups of 70, sometimes even groups of 12, but when it comes down to the three, maybe not so much. The thing for me is, I think this is a challenge for us as the church grows and expands in our influence and impact in the world, is that our spans of relationship need to decrease. The more we're involved in mission, the more we're involved in wanting to see lives transformed, the more we need the three, the more we need closer connection with people who are going to champion us, who are going to encourage us, who are going to hold our hands up when we're struggling. And that, in my experience, to build intimacy, you need to be vulnerable with people. And that takes time, it takes energy, it takes risk and courage. Yet for us to be all that God's called us to be, Jesus himself needed the three. He needed the 12, he needed the 70, he needed the crowd, but he needed the three. And that was Jesus. How much more do you and I need those kinds of relationships? I'm reminded of a passage in Proverbs, which is just an encouragement, a wisdom verse, and it says, he who wants to be friends, to have friends, must show himself friendly. Pretty obvious, but I think that's a truth for us, that to show ourselves friendly today, we've got to make a commitment to build intimate relationships with people, to realize that for us to be successful and to achieve all that God's called us to as individuals, as families, as a bubble, as the church, this community, we need intimate relationships that we can share some of the most important things of our lives with, because they'll champion us, they'll strengthen us, they'll give us resilience to be able to walk through it and to face whatever is in front of us and to come out the other side having the statement that what Jesus was able to declare is that it is finished. I've completed the task. As Paul says, I've run the race. We need those kinds of relationships. We cannot afford to be Nigel no-mates in this time. We need intimate relationships. So in your bubble today, why don't you have a conversation around what would it take for me, for us? How would we need to change our lives, the way we live our lives, to give room for intimate relationships, to decrease our span of relationships? Because I think it's easy to remain in a relationships where you don't have to share the deep, intimate stuff, the stuff you're struggling with. I think that's easy and it's comfortable, but it does not transform us and it does not allow us to become all that God has designed us to be. So what would it take in your group, in your life, for you to build those kinds of intimate relationships if you don't have them yet? How are you going to decrease your span of relationships? Grace and peace, everyone. Thanks for listening.